First commenter Akasajir asks, quote, will Russia ever win this war, as it's a back and forth game where Ukraine enters some parts of Russia and then vice versa, and some people say Russia is fighting NATO. Right, first of all, Russia is fighting NATO indirectly at the moment. Clear distinction from fighting directly. NATO countries are supplying advanced equipment, training Ukrainian troops, providing powerful munitions like ATACMS and Storm Shadow missiles, and of course providing billions in military aid. But are the national militaries of NATO countries deploying entire divisions into Ukraine to fight Russia? No. Right? You don't have the British armed forces or the Royal Navy or the German armed forces in Ukraine or in Russia. If that were the case, that would be a huge escalation, so significant that it would bring Russia into a direct conflict with NATO. This is extremely unlikely, and in fact NATO aid is going to drop off as we enter 2025 because America under Trump is not likely to support Ukraine more. It's likely to support it less, and most likely to sue for peace, to push for peace. And the Western powers in Europe would follow the example, of course, of Big Daddy USA. Even if they chose to go a different way, the Western powers in Europe, public sentiment, i.e. public feeling, in Western Europe is slipping on supporting Ukraine in this war. They have been given they have been given billions of dollars, and all it has done is slow Russia down, not even stopping the Great Eastern Bear. Going back to the question though, will Russia ever win this war, as it looks like a back and forth, end quote. It's not a back and forth. Look on a map, type in Ukraine, map of Ukraine into Google, and on many of them you will see the map. You will see Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia and Crimea are all labeled as annexed or occupied territory. These are regions Russia has held for over 2 years. No back and forth there, guys. Effectively, these are Russian-controlled territories now, and I would be very surprised if they are given back to Ukraine in any peace deal in any way, shape or form. As for Ukraine invading Russia, the other way around, Ukraine invaded a small sliver of territory in undefended, it should be said, territory in Russia in the Kursk Oblast, and fighting there actually has led to a loss of 50% of what they had initially gained. So what they initially gained was small, and they've already lost half of it. It's not the same. What Russia has taken and held over this war and what Ukraine has taken and held over this war are not comparable. As for if Russia will, quote, win, I've given my forecast in several previous TikToks. Without going in too deep, here's what I think is likely to happen. A peace deal is reached early in 2025. The oblasts Russia controls, they will hold on to, either directly or indirectly. They're not going to give them back. They will also demand Ukraine not be pulled into or allowed into NATO for a number of years at least. This one is very likely not to be publicized very loud or at all. It's possible it would even be a private deal not mentioned in public in any capacity. So nobody knows that Ukraine is being barred from NATO except Ukraine and NATO and Russia. You won't hear about it in the news, is what I'm saying. If you hear about it in the news, though, for example, it says that, NATO will not consider Ukrainian membership for 5 years or 10 years, then the situation was much worse for Ukraine at the negotiating table than I expected. Finally, Russia will demand the Ukrainian administration be changed in favor of a more pro-Russian government. That one will be tricky. That one will not be declared, of course, but you'll see it in action over the coming years based on who is president or who stays president and who makes up the Ukrainian government. Ukraine is, of course, a democracy, so you can't just make an agreement like that and make it public. What's less likely than what I've just described is if the war continues. The war carries on, meaning NATO, Ukraine and Russia can't agree to terms of peace, and Russia continues then to make slow and steady gains over a longer period of time, continuing the fighting, and then everyone comes back to the negotiating table anyway. But this time Ukraine has to concede, give up even more than it had to if it had come to the negotiating table and agreed to something earlier. So either way, Russia has, quote, won, you could say. It's not that NATO, by the way, can't beat Russia. I'm not pro-Russian. I'm not a champion for Russia. I'm just giving you sound geopolitical analysis based on a variety of sources from all sides of this conflict. It's not that NATO can't beat Russia, it's that the Western powers will be unwilling to commit even more to a lost cause that is Ukraine, unfortunately, for them. Especially since committing more in resources and manpower and war support in its various ways, and then losing again will potentially lead to even greater concessions having to be made, and even greater losses by funding a lost cause. I described some of these possible losses in previous TikToks. They include Russia taking even more Ukrainian territory and changes potentially affecting the countries of Moldova and the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. The longer the war goes on, the more likely it is to expand, and at the expense, of course, of the lives of people on both sides. And of course, there's also the monetary expense. In summary, the outcome is very likely, good to hear, peace in Eastern Europe, hopefully soon. How soon, though, is hard to say. I'll see you on the next one.